year ago. You can use those, but there's other ways as well, including the fact that there are individuals all over the world who now realize the extent to which their privacy is being compromised, who are now using things like encryption and other technologies to build a brick wall around their communications that the NSA truly can't invade. And if enough individuals do that, that will be a meaningful step in preventing what was supposed to be and still could be the greatest invention of human democratization and liberalization, which is the internet, and prevent it from being turned into the greatest and most potent means of social coercion and social control. There really are things that we as individuals can do that determine that outcome. But I just want to close on one related point about how change happens. And it was probably the biggest reason that I wanted to write this book. And that was to try and communicate as best I could the lesson that I feel like I personally learned over the last year from having worked with Edward Snowden, having worked on these materials. And it is a lesson that I feel will profoundly shape how I view the world and my life and my own acts as an individual for the rest of my life. And the lesson is this. I've been writing about politics for 9 years now, and I have mostly focused on these large injustices that have taken place in the wake of the war on terror, that have been perpetrated by this democratically unaccountable American national security state and the massive corporations that are its partners. And one of the things I realized early on is that if you go around and just talk about those injustices and dissect them and analyze them and document them, there's this serious danger that you can kind of spread this like gloomy defeatism. You know, somebody listens to you talk about these things for an hour, and instead of being inspired, they say, you know what, I just listened to this person completely depress me, and I feel like I want to go throw myself off a bridge because there's nothing I can do about it. These powers are too entrenched. These injustices are too enormous for me as an individual ever to do anything about them. And this is a temptation to which we all have the danger of succumbing. In fact, it is a temptation that people who wield power deliberately cultivate. They want you to believe that you're too weak and powerless to ever meaningfully challenge them. It's a form of learned helplessness. It breeds passivity. And it's a very potent human temptation in some ways because it relieves us of the obligation as individuals to do anything. We tell ourselves it's too big and there's nothing we can do, but it also plays on our fears. The idea that these are such powerful forces that if you meaningfully challenge them, they can crush you. That is what they want people to think. And I think the lesson of the last year, the lesson that I personally learned by watching Edward Snowden do what he did, which is, here was this 29-year-old kid who grew up quite poor. I mean, maybe lower middle class, probably poor. His father was in the Coast Guard for 30 years. Snowden didn't finish high school. He had no family connections, no power, no position, no prestige, completely ordinary, a fairly low-level employee of this massive global corporation. And yet, through nothing more than an act of consciousness, through an act of fearless commitment to his own values, he literally changed the world. And there are all other kinds of other examples of completely obscure and powerless people through acts of conscience changing the world. Whether it's Rosa Parks refusing to sit at the back of a bus, or a Tunisian street vendor setting himself on fire and sparking this regional conflagration and revolution against some of the world's most brutal and entrenched dictators. There are all kinds of historical examples, distant and recent, that ought to teach us the lesson that any structure built by human beings, no matter how formidable or entrenched or powerful it might seem, can always be torn down and replaced by other human beings. And I think the real lesson of Edward Snowden is that we should forever have the antidote to giving in to this kind of defeatism. The real lesson, I think, is that no matter who you are as an individual, you really do, and that sounds trite, but it really is true, you really do have within yourself the ability to change the world, whatever that might mean. Influencing one person who influences another, who influences several others, inspired by your example, however big or small it might be. We all have that ability. And you can change the world if you summon the right will, and you have clarity about your political convictions, and you decide that defending them is something that is important enough to you. And at the very least, what it should do, if not inspire you, is prevent you from ever again telling yourself that you're too weak or too meek or too powerless to really make a difference. There's now all sorts of evidence that prove that that really is the supreme end. So with that, I really thank you very much for coming tonight.